Good afternoon, everyone. We'll give it just a minute before we get started so everyone can get logged on today. And so I can find all of my buttons in Zoom. I don't know if anyone else is like that, but the second they launch into a share screen mode on a meeting or whatever it may be, they just lose all track of every window on their computer. Awesome. I hope everyone's having a good day. I know a lot of you are probably wrapping up your spring event season. I hope you have all thrived through that and are ready for maybe a little bit of a reprieve before you launch into too many big campaigns and with year-end giving just around the corner already. Even though it's only June, but it's never too early to get started. Awesome. Let's see. I think we're hitting pretty good numbers. We'll go ahead and get started to make sure we have enough time today. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Danny Clough. I'm the Channel Marketing Coordinator over here on the QGIve team. Today, I'm joined by Brendan Smith from QGIve's Business Development team, as well as Bradley Martin from Feathr, who's going to be sharing insights from Feathr's annual State of Nonprofit Marketing Report. Mouthful, but I got it out. I also want to remind you all that today's webinar does qualify for 1 credit of CFRE continuing education. So if that applies to you, make sure you're taking advantage of that. Then a few house notes before we begin today. We are recording today's session, so everyone who's registered will be receiving an email tomorrow with a link to the recording as well as a few additional free resources. Please feel free to use the chat today as we go through the webinar to talk with Bradley, Brendan, and I as we go, and as well as your other peers on the webinar today. If you have any questions, you can put those into the Q&A area, and then Bradley will answer them as we go, or if there's some at the end that you think of, we can answer them then as well. There we go. And as some of you may have noticed, QGIve did join the Bloomerang team earlier this year. We've joined forces to offer a modern giving platform that puts relationships at the heart of fundraising. The combined solution unifies your donors' activities, giving you the power to acquire new donors, cultivate impactful relationships, and maximize your donor communities. And of course, I always want to refer you all to our wonderful partner network, Feathr, of course, being one of those partners. Fethr's nonprofit marketing platform helps you run and report on integrated marketing campaigns with easy-to-use advertising, email, and digital engagement tools. Before we get started, I can't forget to introduce you to today's speaker, Bradley. Bradley comes to us with over 15 years of experience. The last several of those years, he spent immersed in the nonprofit tech space, helping nonprofits leverage data-driven insights and innovative marketing strategies so you can build lasting relationships with your donors. I know Bradley has a lot to share today, so I will step out of the way, give him the floor so we can get things started.
All right, awesome. Well, first off, I just want to say thank you for letting us come on and share with your awesome audience. I was just telling Danny that I actually spent some time at Bloomerang in Kindful. Kindful became part of the Bloomerang family back in 2021, and I was there for that, and then have went on and started doing some other things, and been really excited about my journey so far at Feathr. And so I'm excited to be here today to talk to you guys about the state of nonprofit marketing and things like that. I always like to start these things. I like to keep things as interactive as possible. I told Danny this, like, if you guys want to jump in the chat, let me know a little bit about your organization, where you're from. I'd love to see those things come through. I also am fully comfortable with being interrupted. I actually prefer it. It kind of gets a little bit out of the monotony of just me talking at a screen and laughing at my own jokes. Hopefully, Danny and Brendan will make me feel good about myself every now and then, because they're the only 2 faces I can see. So a little bit about myself. So as mentioned already, I'm the VP of Growth Marketing at Feathr. I absolutely love talking to nonprofit professionals about how to better engage and acquire more donors, and not only donors, but engage with their local community and audience. And so Feathr has been an amazing fit for me. I live in Nashville, Tennessee. This is my crew, my wife and 4 kids. It's never a dull moment in our home. We eat lots of ice cream. And as it's already been mentioned, I spent the last 7 years, which is probably really all that's relevant here, focused in the nonprofit tech space and really thinking about how nonprofits can better engage and acquire donors. And so what we're going to be covering today is back at the beginning of the year. Really, it was kind of mid Q1. We at Feathr, we surveyed 446 nonprofit professionals, primarily from organizations that are mid-sized nonprofit organizations. We asked them 14 questions about their marketing efforts. And we talked to them about their top challenges, main priorities, and new investments. And so my goal today is to walk you through some of that data and some of the insights we found, and hopefully that's relatively interesting. And then I'm going to kind of end the last part of the presentation saying like how can you take some of those insights we learn and actually put them into work at your nonprofit. So my goal is to give some tips and tricks or some tactical things you can attempt to try or consider as you're thinking about marketing in your nonprofit. And so, again, like to keep things interactive. So Danny was willing to entertain me a little bit. We're going to launch a couple polls throughout this. And so the first one is I'd ask, what is your primary focus with your marketing this year? So we're going to tell you what came out of the survey, but these were some of the more specific ones. Are you looking to do community awareness, event promotion, donor acquisition, donor retention? Obviously, there's some others that would be in there, but these were some of the few that got most impact. Danny, I can't see how many people are filling this out or what percentage, but you can feel free to end it whenever you think. Maybe we'll give people just a few more seconds, but I'd love for everyone to participate here. Be interested to see what people think. So as you're thinking about marketing at your nonprofit, what's the one or, well, you can't choose more than one. What's the one thing that you're most interested in trying to drive?
Real close to 100%. So I'm trying to give it a
Sweet.
second to get us up there.
That's a rarity, I think, like to get everyone to participate. So there's at least one or two people that are looking at another screen. I'm fully convinced of that. But
we did have a question already, and I think it would be relevant to answer before we tee it up, or to at least let folks know that you will be answering it.
Sure.
It was about what's considered a mid-sized organization in terms of the report.
That's a great question. What we found was that the most average was between organizations between 1 and 10 million in revenues was right around. We did have about 20% that were smaller. Well, let me say this. I guess about 10% that were below 500,000 in revenue. We had another 20% or so that was over or between 500,000 and a million. Now, our biggest chunk was this 1 million to 10 million. And then we had about 10% that was over 10 million. So
There we go. And then you should see the results on your screen.
great. So this pretty closely mirrors a lot of what we saw as well, is that donor acquisition, donor retention. The one thing that is interesting that you guys are pushing on a little bit more here is community awareness, that we didn't see as much in our live survey with the 446. So I'm going to go ahead and close this and move on to the next slide. So one of the biggest trends we saw out of the data was that donor acquisition is the primary focus of marketing. And so what in the survey, when we sent it, we gave people the option to choose their top 3. So we didn't force them just to choose one. And these were the 3 that really came out. But the most common thing we saw was that 73.4% of individuals, when given the opportunity to choose more than one, said that donor acquisition was one of their top priorities this year when it comes to marketing. And so, this was a little bit of a surprise for me, honestly. Like, as I thought through the data and some of the trends I feel like I have observed, I feel like in previous years and things like that, we saw a lot more pushed on donor retention and a lot more discussion around donor retention. And we definitely feel like I'm seeing a shift more towards donor acquisition. And I was wrong about this, but awareness was the bigger thing too, of like broader awareness in the market. And so we're going to go through a couple surveys here. The next one, maybe we can speed through a little bit more, is where will you be increasing your spend in channels this year? And so Danny's going to launch this one for me. But where will you be increasing your spend in marketing channels this year? We'll be doing that via digital ads, social ads, email marketing. The thing I would say is, like, just to be clear about the specific difference between digital ads and social ads. Digital ads, think about like advertising on like banner ads on websites and things like that, where social ads would be on your Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. I refuse to call it X. Like, I just can't get there. But Twitter, things like that. Will you be further investing in email marketing, direct mail, TV, radio, or print? And so whenever we get to a point to where we can launch that one.
Do you see it on your screen, Bradley?
I don't. I'm not seeing the percentages. So whenever you feel like we're, over 60, 70%, we can go ahead and move on for the sake of time.
Perfect. Here we go.
Okay, great. So again, social ads leading the way. Still, email marketing looks like it edged in right over direct mail and digital ads. But yes, like, this is a lot of what we're seeing. And so the second big trend that we saw is that organizations are increasing their investment in digital ads and social media. And so if you look at this is a little bit hard to read. And so I'm going to just highlight a few things, right? So increasing investment, we saw organizations, when they were able to choose the areas that they were able to choose up to 3 that they were going to be increasing, we saw a pretty significant increase in digital ads and social media, right? Most people are obviously continuing to invest in email. Lots of people are looking for ways to increase their investment, which I think is pretty interesting. And then lastly, people are really starting to cut back on direct mail and TV, radio, and print, right? And I think that's just a nature of that. More people there's less opportunity and less eyeballs in these areas, right? Maybe not in direct mail. People are still getting the mail in their inbox, but definitely people are spending more time on the social ad networks, and the inbox is still highly effective. So last survey, and I promise I'll leave you guys alone on this front, but in terms of digital marketing, which channel do you find most effective? So is it email, Facebook, peer-to-peer, LinkedIn, digital advertising, online communities? Which one is your organization finding most effective? So throw those answers in real quick, and we'll go ahead and move on this one as well. All right.
Here we go.
So again, mirrors very much what I'm about to share from a trend perspective. So email is still the most effective digital marketing channel. It's funny because I actually, before I got into the nonprofit tech space, I worked at an email marketing company called Emma Email Marketing that was here in Nashville. And even since then, that's been, goodness, probably 10 years ago. Every single year since the last 10 years, everyone's been consistently saying that email is dead, right? That email is no longer effective. And year over year, organizations, especially in the nonprofit space, but not only in the nonprofit space, in many other sectors, email is still highly effective, right? And it's still driving much of the way in terms of digital advertising or digital ways you can meet people. Having someone's email address is still a highly effective way to get people to engage with your organization and continue to remind them to come back, right? And so I thought one of the things that was really interesting to me is how much organizations are also saying that Facebook is becoming really effective for them. And so I think as we often think about the social media networks, it kind of feels like Facebook is like kind of, going out of style a little bit. It's the one that's kind of been around the longest, obviously, but it for organizations, these 446 organizations, and from what you guys just said, it's the second most effective channel. I don't think I find that surprising, but I thought some of these others might be closer to competing with it, and it's just far and away the thing that seems to be working the best for organizations. So wanted to share some of those initial trends because I felt like those were things that, like, you can really think through. And I know we kind of breezed through this information, but you can really think through in terms of how does your organization thinking about marketing, and the word marketing is broad. So it's like, how are you engaging your community, engaging your donors, acquiring new donors? Where are you investing your time and energy and resources? Felt like this was a good opportunity to share how other organizations are thinking about those things. Now, there's a couple other trends that we found really interesting, right? How did your online giving grow or decline between 2022 and 2023? The broad majority in 2023 said that they either increased less than 10% or more than 10%. So broadly, the nonprofit market, because 38% of our respondents didn't know this right off the top of their head when they were responding to the survey. So this looks like 45%, but it's actually a much bigger percent when you take out that 40%. So well over half of the people who did know said that their digital their online giving grew in 2023. This isn't surprising. This is something we continue to see in all the benchmark reports and things like that. The online giving is continuing to grow, and it's an area that if you're not investing your time and energy at this point, you definitely need to be, right? And you need to be thinking about it beyond just checking a box. It's really starting to become a thing where you actually really have to think about the donor experience and making sure that you're providing a good experience that and not only a good experience for someone to be able to give easily, but also thinking about like when someone comes and shows interest, being able, how do you continue to engage them even if you don't have them on your email list and things like that. So there's a lot of things I think that you can take a lot of thoughts away from retail and e-shopping things of like how they continue to keep you engaged even if you don't make a purchase. Is your organization thinking about some of that from an online giving perspective? Because there's a lot of organizations that are starting to really go down that path. So what challenges do you foresee in achieving your marketing goals this year? This is something that I feel like has been the common theme for organizations for many years, is there continues to be limited budgets and resources. This is no surprise, right? Like I actually think it's the same thing as staffing constraints. Like these are similar ideas. It's just said differently. And so, I think as you're continuously thinking about how you need to do more, it's just a reality for organizations that it continues to be a challenge, right? And so I think I wouldn't be surprised if I grabbed 10 of you off this call and said, why aren't you doing these things? You might just say, I just don't have the time, right? Like, or I don't have the resources. And so just wanted to more or less say, you're in good company, right? Like this is something that many organizations are dealing with, is the challenge of how to find time to do these things that we might be suggesting. So what emerging marketing trends are you investing in? This, again, I don't think is surprising based on, the proliferation of video, of TikTok and Instagram Reels and all the stuff that more people are looking to do more with video. I did want to just take a moment to say that like video marketing feels extremely overwhelming, right? It does for me. I've been doing digital marketing for 15 years, and thinking about trying to produce a video to get it out there feels overwhelming, right? What I would encourage you to think about is that I think more and more people aren't expecting or even needing, highly produced videos. Just an executive director standing, at an event, or standing, where you're making your impact, or sharing the impact that you have made, just recording on their iPhone and putting that in an email or posting that on your social media profiles or whatever, like it'll increase your engagement, and it's incredibly authentic, right? Like I think those two things are really it's becoming less and less needed that it has to be highly produced. There's time and place for highly produced videos, and all the different ways you can cut videos and make things look really great. And, with the advancements in tools like Canva and stuff like that, that's continuing to get easier. But also I would just encourage you, as you think about video marketing, make it, just make it simple. Don't overthink it. The other things I would call out here is, personalization, AI powered tools, like all these things are just becoming more of the norm, and it's something that you should really be thinking about. The one thing I feel like we missed is when we think about personalization, I would challenge you to think more about relevance than just personalization. And it's more about like, using someone's first name or calling out the amount they gave last year. Just make sure that, you're taking the time to make sure that messages you're sending and how you're engaging your donors, like if you have different programs, that you're sending the one to them that they are going to find most relevant. I think that's really, really valuable. Okay, I did want to talk about the elephant in the room. And to me, the elephant in the room is AI, right? And it's, how is your organization approaching the adoption of AI in its marketing efforts, if at all? And so I think I think this applies to most marketers, not just nonprofit, professionals or marketers, is that we're all trying to figure this thing out, right? We're exploring AI, but we've not formalized anything yet. I spend a lot of time using ChatGPT and Gemini on Google, and I've been messing around with it a lot and trying to really figure out where is its place in our marketing efforts, right? There's a big portion of people, 33%, that would say that they are considering AI for their marketing efforts, but haven't really taken action on it yet. And only 7% are saying they're actively investing in AI. So meaning that like they actively have a plan around it. I'm going to give you some further tips a little bit later in the presentation about how I think you can use AI as a good starting point. And so we will definitely get to that. So so those are the major insights. And so now what I'm really going to try to move towards is just a little bit of the discussion around how we can how you can use some of these insights and some tactics and things you might want to think about as you're thinking about your marketing efforts, especially when it comes to digital marketing. I do want to pause before I highlight this quote and see if there's any questions about the data so far. And so if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in. I'll give us just a beat here. But if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in. I'll keep an eye out, but let me know if you have any. So, so I think one of the things that Taylor Shanklin over at Barley has been in the space for a really long time. I'm a big fan of hers, but she pointed out there's so many bright, shiny objects. Some are great, some are a flash in the pan. Nonprofits need to keep doing the basics really well and keep doing the channels that they know are working really well. So as we go through these ideas, I just wanted to ground us. And I think some of the things I'm going to share and some of the ideas I'm going to share is interesting. Sorry, I saw a question come in and I got distracted, but I will answer it in just a second. But as you're thinking through like approaching digital marketing and things like that, I would just be cautious not to try to chase every shiny object. And I think this is a thing that boards can do to us a lot. Boards can often say like, hey, have you guys thought about this? Or are you using this? Or are you doing that? And I think the thing that you have to really stay grounded in is the idea that like we need to do the basics well. And we need to feel confident in the basics. I actually saw a great post the other day from I'm blanking on his name, but he's one of the sales folks over at Bloomerang, and he was pointing out on LinkedIn like, when's the last time you went through your donation form process yourself and really reviewed your donor experience? When's the last time you did that? Right? Many of you might say, I've done that recently, but if you haven't, like it's a great, like that's the basics. Like, is it all working the way you think? Does the flow work the way you think it would? Is your thank you email up to date? Things like those are the basics. So as I share some of these ideas, what I don't want you to do is get too lost in the ideas and realize you don't have to try to consider doing all of them. Emily asked a great question. Is there any data on how donors feel about AI? Curious about that. We did not ask that question. It would be a great follow-up question. I think we're going to do some more content specifically around AI. And Emily, I'm going to take that down and send it to the team as we think about asking some questions and things, because I think it would be great to hear how folks are feeling about it. I will give you just a quick thought in that I'm still very skeptical. I think it's really useful. But what I found personally is it provides, and many people have documented this over and over and over again, it's not very accurate, right? Like it provides a lot of false information. It just makes stuff up, which is really you have to be really cautious of when you're attempting to use it to ensure that you're not letting it accidentally provide false information or inaccurate information, just because it kind of does whatever it wants, which is, concerning. So you didn't necessarily ask me for my thought, but gave it anyways. Okay. So a couple things like just we've kind of already went through a little bit of this, but like nonprofits are facing 4 primary challenges as they seek to grow impact, right? Change is constant at this point. AI is evolving. The ChatGPT just launched the 4.0 or whatever. Don't even really know what that means, but it's this huge change in AI. The competition for attention is fierce and it's driving up costs. And so I want to be clear about competition. You're really not competing with other nonprofits at this point. You are, obviously, but you're competing for people's attention, right? Like in attention spans, there's just so much information out there. We're bombarded with different pieces of information. So this is where I believe relevance is so important. You've got to get down to having some relevant content that people can engage with, right? There's a lot of confusion. There's so much data out there for us to review. And so it's like, what's important to look at? And then obviously we've already talked about the issue with, being understaffed and under resources. There's just competing priorities constantly that we have to deal with in as nonprofit professionals. And so, sorry, I'm clicking the wrong spot here. So what I wanted to try to start to take a little bit of a shift from is what this kind of leads to is what we see in organizations when we talk to them is like typical marketing. And typical marketing typically looks like organizations that they choose to do nothing. They're trying to do everything all at once. Or what they find themselves doing is what we call like ad hoc, campaigns where it's like, well, let's try this thing, but it's not part of a more cohesive, overarching strategy. And so what we're really trying to help people do at Feathr is think through this slightly differently and start to think about like, what does good marketing look like? Not only, just good marketing, but also marketing that does good, right? And so one of the things we always highlight is that it needs to be audience first, right? You really want to focus on how are you thinking about your audiences? And this gets back to relevancy, right? Are you using things to make things automated, right? Do you have an automated welcome series? Do you have automated retargeting ads that go out? Things that can continue to keep people engaged, but you can somewhat set it and forget it. Careful on saying totally set it and forget it because we always do have to manage these things. Is it omni-channel, right? Are you reaching people in their inbox on Facebook, right? With digital ads? Are you sharing the same message in multiple places so they are seeing your message not in just one place, right? And then is what you're doing measurable, right? Are you able to get back meaningful results? And so to get a little bit more specific, one of the insights, right, that I really thought about as I was going through this data and things like that is your audience is more than your email list. Right? It's important to gain a deeper understanding of your audience and invest in building a broader reach. And so I think like one of the reasons we call out email being so effective is that we do often know quite a bit about who we're reaching out to. We can segment it well. We can, think about like this donor gave to this program, recently and things like that. And so I think there's just a lot of things that we think about as we think about like your audience and then how are we building it out, right? And so one of the things that like I've been really thinking about a lot is like, are you able to define, how are you defining your audience segments? And so this is some of the things that we're able to do in a platform like Feathr. You could likely do this in other platforms as well. But, it's like, are you able to actually start to segment people before they become a actual donor. And so, there's some platforms you can even do this with some of the Google tools out there and things like that. But, what we're looking at here is actually being able to start to segment people down to the actual like pages they looked at on our website. And I could combine this with if I knew that they had an email address and I wanted to send them specific Facebook ads or something like that. And so I would just try to think about whether this is segmenting your email list, whether this is segmenting your website visitors, whether this is segmenting your Facebook audience, things like that. But thinking about how you're segmenting your audience is really important. Because again, it gets back to that relevance. Like I want to serve things that people find relevant. And so I would start to think about defining your audience segments very clearly. And you also want to be careful to not find yourself, creating so many segments that they're unmanageable, right? Or you don't find good results. You want to keep your segments specific, but still relatively broad. So another thing that you might want to start considering doing, right, is how are you finding similar audiences, right? Like there's some really cool things out there you can use now that is more around affinity lists. And again, this is something that you're able to do across multiple different platforms, but it's, trying to find people who meet a certain demographic or have a certain behavior that might align with what your organization's mission is. And so you can do this with things like on some of the social platforms that are called lookalike audiences. But the goal is really, how do I find people and put an ad out in front of them? This is on some sort of game or something like that, where it's not the fact that they're playing the game. It's that the person that is playing the game is seeing my ad because they meet certain criteria. So as you're thinking about digital advertising, how are you putting your organization's content, ads, high funnel information out in front of the right audience and making it relevant? Other thing that I think is just a big missed opportunity for many, many organizations is what we call retargeting, and it's running ads to people who have already come to your website. So if you have a limited budget to be able to go do digital advertising or social advertising, this to me is the way to go about it. So what you're able to do is to put a small little tracking script on your website. This is typically really easy to implement. And you're able to serve targeted ads to people who visit specific pages of your website. And so this to me is just, again, it's the one thing that I think that organizations are missing maybe the most. And so the thing I would call out about this is I use a really simple example is imagine a humane society that has a page that's more focused on dogs, and they have a page that's more focused on cats. And so you could see dog versus, cat traffic. And it's, people have come to look to adopt a cat. What I would like to do, right, is be able to go out and serve ads to them that show pictures of cats that are available for adoption, right? Versus showing people who've come to the dog page ads of dogs. And so it's a very simple thing, but that sort of segmentation is what creates relevance and what will get people to come back and engage with your site. And so it's highly cost effective, and it's really, really effective from a standpoint of actually getting people to further engage with your organization. So I'm gonna give away a little bit of my this is something I always feel weird doing, but email is still effective, but it's becoming increasingly noisy. So what I'm going to share with you, right, is that right now in my personal email inbox, I do slightly better with my work one. I was looking on my phone. I have 46,000 unread emails, right? And so it is becoming it's becoming incredibly challenging, to effectively get through someone's inbox. right? And so open rates are decreasing, click-through rates are decreasing. It's becoming increasingly noisy. And so what we're really starting to see where people are finding effective things to do is to use your email list, not only to reach people in their inbox, but to also run ads. This is called email mapping. And what you're able to do is to serve online ads to 60 to 80% of the people who are currently not opening your emails. And it might just be that they're spending less time in their inbox because it's so noisy, or they're just deleting things to try to get to inbox zero, which feels almost impossible. I'm going to pause 1 second because Callie asked a couple of good questions. So is that something we can manage on our own without experience, or do we need to contract that out? Retargeting ads is, and further asked is assuming that's Google Ads. So retargeting advertising you can do through like tools like Google, but you can also do retargeting on Facebook, on display advertising and things like that. I would say it's not super technical to implement, and there's really great articles out there that will walk you through step by step on how to do that directly with Facebook, with a platform like Feathr, or even with Google Ads and stuff like that. But yeah, you can do it across multiple platforms, and it's super effective. So it's definitely retargeting, something you definitely want to look into. You could just Google, how to do Facebook retargeting, and there will be ads and ads on how to do it. You would likely need to be able to to sorry, I keep getting questions and I have a hard time doing two things at once, and they're great questions. But you definitely would need to be able to add a little bit of code to your website. It's super simple, and typically if you're using a WordPress site, HubSpot site, Wix, something like that, there's typically a place to do it that doesn't take a developer to be able to do it. One other quick question that came in is, does users' email addresses, going back to this, what's on the screen now, email mapping, does users' email address need to match what we have in our email marketing platform and their social media account? Yeah, typically. And I think, what we find oftentimes is people are using their personal email address when they're giving, unless you do a lot with corporate donors. And they're typically, it's their personal email address. So for nonprofit organizations, when they're giving, they're typically using their personal email address for both. The thing that, this actually becomes a little bit harder for businesses because a lot of people are using their business email address for, on their email list and things like that. But they use their personal email address for their social media profiles. So yeah, it's not going to match 100%, but it's a good thing to try, right? And see what match rate you can get. And typically the platforms will tell you. Okay, so again, thinking about how you can use your email list beyond just sending emails is a really valuable thing. And it's a unique thing that many organizations are not currently doing. Okay, so going back to AI for a second, it's here to stay, but it's not going to take our jobs. And I say yet, it's kind of meant to be a joke. It's really not funny, but it's a thing to consider, is that it still takes human intervention. And so I want to share a couple of things that I feel like are effective ways to use AI, right? I like to use it as an idea generator. This is a personal anecdote, but I thought it was really interesting. My wife and I the other day were sitting down at the dinner table. We have 3 kids that all play sports, and so we're in and out of the house all the time. And we were talking about, we really needed to find some easier ways to, or some easier dinners to make. And so I went to ChatGPT, typed in, we're a family of 6 that is on the go. Provide us a 30-day meal plan with easy to prepare meals. And in just a few moments, it spit out 30 different ideas of meals. And we started to run through those ideas. And we picked out 6 or 7 that we're like, oh, that sounds really good. And then we asked it to give us recipes. Right. And so what I'm trying to get to is you can really use it as a brainstorm partner. You can go ask it big, broad questions and say, hey, give me ideas around this topic, and it will spit out a bunch of ideas. And then you can review those and figure out, which ones are useful, which ones aren't, things like that. You can also build reusable prompts. And so one of the biggest things about AI is when you want to go ask it a question, you need to be really detailed, And just asking it a big, broad question, won't, like if you said, write me an appeal, or write me an appeal for my nonprofit, it's not going to be very useful. But if you give it a lot of detail, it's kind of the effort you put in is what you're going to get out. You can also ask it to refine its responses. So you can say, for some reason, I always feel like I'm at sharing things, telling it thank you. So I'm like, hey, thank you, ChatGPT. That was a great response. Can you remove this word, or can you make it sound more personable? Can you tell me what other information you would need from me to make it better? It will talk back and forth for you and continue to refine its responses. So you don't always have to take what it gives you at face value. I love to use it as an editor and grammar checker. Do this all the time when I'm sending important emails and things like that, or we're putting together an email marketing campaign. I will often ask the team, have you taken the time to do a edit and grammar check via one of the AI platforms? And the last thing, I've already said this, but you always have to fact check it. Like if you're asking for it to write long form content and it's citing sources or doing anything like that, it's very important to take the time to fact check it. So Emily asked, would you recommend using AI for grant writing? I think I think it's a great tool to use, maybe to help you edit your grant writing and or actually provide you a starting point. I would be really cautious on assuming that it's going to be able to, do something fully for you, but as being a thought partner and a tool to help you refine your responses or give you a starting point, I think it's an okay tool to use for that. I just think you have to be really cautious to assume that it's going to be able to do any sort of project fully without human intervention. And I don't think we really want that, right? Like I think we want to be able to use these platforms to help us, but they shouldn't replace us. Or I feel like there's a moral dilemma around using it to fully do something. I think I feel more comfortable with allowing it to help edit or improve. There's a couple chats come in. Oh yeah, Gabe, personal tip for ChatGPT. Some of you guys might have already seen this. You can give it some writing samples of your own that you're proud of and ask it to write in that same style you do. And that actually works quite well. And so I would fully recommend that. And it will really it can really change its tone if you don't inform it on how to do that. So I'm going to leave you with we're done a little early here, but this is the thing that I would think about as you're just thinking about marketing in general, right? Stories raise more money, more awareness, and more reach and engagement than any other form of content. And so what I think I'll close with you with saying this is that sharing your impact when you can. I know there's some organizations that really struggle to be able to share their impact because it's either confidential and or it's something that is not a positive thing that you necessarily want to go out and share. But it's really important work. But I think one of the things that we miss is we do appeals, we do things to try to get people to further engage with our organization. It's just ensuring that you're sharing the stories of the impact your organization's making in the community, in the world, and with the population you serve. Right? It's just people are giving to your organization because they want to make an impact, right? And they care deeply about the impact and the mission of your organization. So make sure you're taking the time continuously to share how they are supporting the impact your organization is making. And I think if you feel really confident you're doing that, then the question starts to become, right? how are you going and sharing, sorry, like as you're just thinking about, as people are giving to you and things like that, how are you going out and sharing the impact you're making? Mary asked a really great question. She says, once a campaign is over, should we be telling everyone, thanks, we raised $62,000? I think there's a place for that, right? Like if you set a goal and people helped you reach that goal, then yes, celebrate with them, right? But I think the thing that matters more is actually sharing, right? The impact that has been made. Yes, and Emily responded and said, you want to share how that money impacted. So you can share, hey, thank you guys so much. We hit our goal, right? But then come back around after you've put that money to work and say, here's the impact it's made to the population we serve, to the community, whatever. Like, and I think showing videos, images, right, of that work, that money at work will keep people engaged, and it'll continue to fuel those endorphins of my money, my donation, my time, my volunteering, whatever, right? Help provide this meaningful impact. See, there's some more questions over here I'm going to jump over to. So Gabe asked a great question. How important would you say images are for letters, emails, especially for accompanying a story? I think very important, right? I think there's a place, though, to not use imagery. I think imagery, like especially in email, when you start to use imagery in emails, it immediately sends off that, hey, this is a marketing email. So like sometimes sending an email that just looks like it's coming from an individual is highly effective. But when you're trying to share the impact and story, using imagery or video is very, very effective. Shelton asked a question that currently I do not. So I think it's important to say when you don't have effective information is, do you have insights or suggestions about text marketing? I'm going to say I do not. I think there's other thought leaders out there that have better thoughts about the effective use of text messaging and the way to make that work for your organization. I can't effectively say that I can give you really great recommendations on that at this point.
Bradley, we did get one question earlier in the chat. Paula asked, can you recommend a specific tool to follow up with donors and also visitors or newcomers to church? I'd like some automation for that, but I can't see it happening unless they're asked to click on something on their website.
So it's more of like people coming to the church in person. Is that what it feels like the question is?
I believe so. Any new donors or those who are coming to visit or newcomers, how can they follow up?
Yeah, I think, in those scenarios, we still have to use some of the classic, processes and hope that people are, attending or giving as much information as they can, collecting people's email addresses and understanding, right, where they are in your donor journey or your, if it's a church, more of like, your attendee journey, right? Like, are they a first time attendee? Are they continuously coming back? I would say it's just again another point is I would assume, right, that before people come to a church, they are often still doing online research about what churches they want to go to or what organizations they want to go to and things like that. It's like before you to go somewhere else, like adopt a pet, right? You might go to multiple websites to figure out where you might want to go to adopt a pet or something. And so I would tell you that it might not be a direct correlation between showing someone, that actually came and, sat in a seat during a congregation versus who's visited your website. But it would be really valuable, right, to continue to put your organization, your church, whatever, out in front of people who have spent some time on your website, whether they've attended or not, until you know who they are, right? Until the system can say, I can attach this email address to this person, and I know that is Danny, right, who is attached to this email address and has been attending, for months, right? And so I think I obviously that's not going to be a direct correlation between website visitors and attendees. but I bet you could capture a lot of the people who are attending by using your website traffic to continue to engage people online, whether that's through Facebook advertising and or Google ads or whatever. Looks like
Great. I think we made it through all the questions.
okay.
Before we
Okay.
wrap things up today, I'll launch a little poll for everyone to give you a chance to opt in to receive further communications from Feathr. I know you've heard a lot of amazing insights from Bradley today, so you're probably chomping at the bit to hear more from them. And I'll give you guys another reminder that today's session is eligible for one continuing education credit for CFRE, so make sure you're taking advantage of that. Thank you again, Bradley, so much for joining us today and for sharing all of those insights. Brendan, is there anything you wanted to add?
Just another thank you, Bradley. That was great. I know we jumped offline, and so you didn't have those faces of reactions, but I was enthralled with it. It's certainly my biggest takeaway from that was you referenced James Golder and his research and how he kind of suggests secret shopping, so to speak, and giving yourself a donation. I think that applies to most of what we're talking about in regards to digital engagement. We're all consumers, right? We've become accustomed to certain interactions with our vendors and softwares that we use online. Are your donors, are your constituents getting that same treatment? Would you be happy with the experience that you're having as a donor on your own website or through your own email engagement, your social media engagement? Keeping it simple is kind of going back to what makes us consumers and what draws us in too. So I think that message was very well placed, and I appreciate the reference to James's work that he does on that research. I think it's incredibly important to know what our baseline is and kind of constantly be reassessing it and adjusting as we see fit. So thank you for that, Bradley. That and all of the other content that you shared with us was great. That was just my one big takeaway.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. And thank you for pointing out that was James. Yes, like I remember seeing that. I do think if anything you take away, right? Like I'll just end on this is like, don't think you have to do all these things, right? Like, and also take the time to put yourself in your donor's shoes and walk through that process. And then think, I always challenge people in any sort of business or whatever. It's like, think simplistically about how you can make this better. You don't have to reach for the stars. It could just be that like, wow, people give a donation and all they get from us is a donation receipt, right? Like, how could I then still send them that transactional receipt? They probably want it, but how could I follow up with a thank you note that shares like, hey, here's what we're up to right now with donations like this. Like share that impact, right? Like that little adjustment can be what keeps people engaged in further supporting your organization, right? And so
Agreed.
a lot of organizations do that incredibly well. But I bet there's a few on the call here that could go through their thing and go, that's a little out of date. It's a little dated. It's not accurate anymore. And it's just because we get really busy, right? Like it's a thing. We set some of the stuff and forget it. I would encourage you, say at least quarterly, put 2 hours on your calendar and say, I need to walk through that process and make sure everything's still accurate and it's as compelling as it could be. So thanks for calling that out, Brendan. I think it's a very simple but effective takeaway.
Agreed.
Absolutely. I was thinking through as you were going through all the AI steps, there's been a lot of conversations about AI recently and a lot of conversations about how overwhelming it is. I want to encourage everyone on this call, do not rely on yourself to figure it out on your own. There are so many resources within the nonprofit space. There are people in the space who are trying to help make it as simple as possible for everyone. I know it is so overwhelming. There are webinars, free resources all over the place. I cannot encourage them enough. I know QGIF has a few resources, but AI will save you a lot of time. I do not trust it. I am somebody who will use it to help get my thought process flowing. It has certain keywords that it likes to play into every single sentence. I think mine is tremendous. Everything is tremendous. If you ever see anything from me and it has that in it, then I have failed at checking my ChatGPT work.
Well, Danny, at some point you are going to have something that you need to say is tremendous. And, now you've put yourself that you're going to just have to use awesome, or whatever. So.
Yeah, it'll be the bane of my existence forever. Well, perfect. Well, we have 5 minutes left, but we'll give you all a little bit of time left in your day. I know it's a busy season right now. I just want to thank you all again for taking time out of your afternoons to join us today. And Bradley, I can't thank you enough for joining us again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having us. Thanks for the audience and all the participation. I really appreciate the great questions and making it fun to be here. And so I really appreciate that. Danny, Brendan, as always, thanks so much for letting us come hang out.
Of course.
And we'll do it again sometime soon.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Bye, everyone.
No, have a good one.
Thank you.